Hey everybody, it's James Vagley here. Welcome to another episode of the MBA podcast, and it's episode 190. And I've got Ash Playstead with me as always in the black corner. How are you today, my friend?
I am fantastic, James. Episode 190. We're into the nervous 190s. Is there such a thing as the nervous one? Yes.
You just made it up, so sure. Yeah.
Good to see.
Um, yeah, you too. So listeners, good to see you as well. If you're watching us on YouTube, or good to speak to you if you're listening to the audio version. Today, we're talking about a concept called hyper-engaged clients. And all this month, we're talking about engaging communities. So this is our section of the mortgage business blueprint that deals with essentially staying in touch with prospects and clients and partners and online and offline communities to, well, essentially put an iron fence around them and get more referrals, more repeat business, more leads. It's a huge section of the blueprint and building a business. Hyper engaged clients. Who wouldn't want that? We've got clients, unless you're brand new. So you've got clients, and you want to get more of them. What's even better is to have hyper engaged clients, because a hyper engaged client will refer more. They will be easier to work with. They will probably use more products and services. There's a whole raft of benefits to having hyper engaged clients. And I'm going to tell you right now, for probably 99.9% of our listeners know you do not have hyper engaged clients. You may have clients that like you and enjoyed your service, liked what you did, and would probably use you again, but no, they are not hyper engaged. Ash, let's sort of start talking about probably the definition of hyper engaged first, and then we can start to go into sharing with our listeners how we start to achieve this.
It's a really important point, and this permeates out through many parts of building a broking business. And it's one of the big areas where brokers get stuck. I know I certainly got stuck here as well. And that is accepting that to understand who your hyper-engaged clients might be, you need to accept the fact that whilst you might work with everybody is not your hyper-engaged client, right? So this is this sort of paradox that, yeah, I can help anybody. I can help first home buyers, investors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, sure, you can. If they walk in your door, you can help them, and they might be super happy. Hopefully they are. You do an amazing job. They love you. They give you a 5-star Google review. That's fantastic. But when it comes to hyper-engaged clients, particularly with engagement on social media platforms and elsewhere, well, I guess that's pretty much everywhere, you can't be everything to everybody in the way that you might be in a one-on-one basis on an individual client basis. So it begs the question, right, James? Who do I love working with the most? Who are they? What are their characteristics? What do I like about working with them? And how do I shape content around those clients who will become engaged and who will become hyper engaged because I'm very passionate about them and they love working with me? And this is a challenge to understand, one, who they are, and two, overcome the fear, I think, that many, many brokers feel is, how do I speak to my perfect client without distancing myself from everybody else?
Yep. It's interesting that you started there in that hyper engaged clients, they're not going to be all of your clients. I think for the average broker that helps everybody with everything, it's only natural that only a small percentage of them will be hyper engaged because they'll just resonate more with that person's personality. If we make sure all our clients are in a similar position, same demographics, same journeys, and we tailor what we're doing to them, I would argue that there's a massive, probably a 10-to-1 chance of having, or there's a 10-to-1 chance of having 10-to-1 of your clients be hyper engaged, because it's not just by chance that they become hyper engaged because they resonate with you. It's by design. And I guess that's what we're getting at, is that every broker has those hyper engaged clients, the ones that actually do refer, that have probably sent you their family and their friends, and they'd probably go, yeah, that's only a few percent. Like, that's not everybody. But what if like 20% or 50% of your clients were like that? And I think that's what we're getting at when we talk about hyper engaged clients, isn't it, Ash? Like, we want to try and expand that small group that love and refer to you and talk about you and make that more and more of your clients uh, because of the way you've developed your ecosystem.
Well, you mentioned it spot on. It's an intentional part, or by design part, I think the words you use, James. It's an intentional part of your strategy. This is the thing. Hyper engaged clients, if you leave it to chance, they will happen because you're great at what you do, right? You're great at what you do. However, as you're building a business and building momentum, you want to move beyond just being great at what you do. You want to be great at executing on a business building strategy, right? And part of that is to be more intentional about generating hyper engaged clients as part of your strategy, rather than it being a byproduct of you just being really good at what you do, which is a big win. To be fair, big win. But to understand how to get clients hyper engaged as part of a process needs to be more intentional, and you need to be able to speak about it, and you need to be able to broadcast that. We're talking about engagement here, right? We're not talking about a client who might love you and send you their friends because you just did a great job. Whilst that's fantastic, as you rightly said, wouldn't it be great, instead of that being one or two clients here or there, if you could turn that into 50% of your clients referred lots of people? And not just that, you were able to speak about that in your engagement process on socials that generated all of this love and affection and interest and ultimately engagement with you and your business. That's the whole strategy, right? Is one feeds the other, and then it becomes this machine that generates, I'll call it love and affection, but let's just call it, hyper engagement, where people want to be in your world. They want to be in your ecosystem. And when they are, they get the love and affection and obviously great service. That goes without saying. But, I don't think you get people hyper engaged by just giving them great service, because I would argue that there's several thousand brokers who give great service. So to get people hyper engaged, you've got to go beyond purely great service. You've got to understand, what are people looking for? Well, they want that love and affection. They want to be understood. They want to be heard. And you can do that if you understand who they are and what it is they want.
So true. Yeah. Just by doing your job and having great customer service and providing those interest rate updates and monthly newsletters and doing an annual review, that's kind of what brokers that do that think it's outstanding, but that's really just the baseline. And how do we move from what most brokers are doing, which is providing great customer service and then doing those reviews and the rate updates and all the standard stuff, to hyper engaged clients? Well, I think, Ash, moving beyond what we talked about last week, which was the message and the messenger. So actually having something different to say and getting out there and communicating that consistently and regularly. It's about doing that for a particular type of audience or client. I think if you're able to have people that are hyper engaged, what does that mean? They very strongly resonate and almost attach themselves to what you do and the outcomes that you can help them provide. So that can only really be achieved if you're working within a target market or a niche. Like, it's not possible to have a generic proposition that creates hyper engaged clients. I don't think it's possible. Like, do you think it's possible to create hyper engagement through being everything to everybody?
I just don't think it is, and it sounds contradictory, right? And I'm sure listeners, you may be thinking, well, isn't that contradictory? But no, it's not. If you just hear us out on this, like, yes, you want people to be super happy with your service. As James said, every single client you deal with, you would want to have that experience, right? Because that's, as James, you said, the baseline, what separates the broking industry from, the proprietary channel, for example, or amongst many things. And we know that the broker market shares sort of escalating every quarter. So we know people love what we do. However, if you want to generate engagement, you can't talk purely about your service proposition, because I would argue that there's hundreds and hundreds and thousands of brokers who've all got exceptional service propositions. Yes, I think you want to blend that in, but you really want to talk about what you've done in that niche, and that's a fear for a lot of business operators, a lot of brokers, right, to move beyond just being good at what they do to building a business around what they're good at. And to do that, you need to be more intentional. You need to be, as we said, more strategic. And I think a big part of that is overcoming that fear that I'm not going to alienate anyone by focusing on a specific niche. I mean, we've seen this how many times, James? Hundreds with our clients. That,
Lots and lots.
if you go sort of narrow and deep on a niche, does not only not limit you with other clients, it actually expands your reach, because people want to do business with someone who's exceptional at dealing with real people in that niche. I've seen it so many times. I'm sure you have too, James. I would just encourage everybody to take the deep dive into understanding who they love working with, and start to craft a strategy around engaging with that audience. I think it's fair to say that you can still put generic content out there as part of your strategy. You can still put interest rates, you can still put stuff like that out. But if you really want a hyper-engaged community, you've got to speak to individual people about their life circumstances that you helped solve, that are within that particular niche. And there's hundreds of different niches. We're not going to go down that rabbit hole of one niche from another. There's hundreds and hundreds of different niches. And then you can inject your voice into that, so you can talk and nobody else can do that. Nobody else can speak to that niche the way that you speak to them. You've got a competitive edge.
Oh, that's so true. I like a metaphor that came to mind, Ash, was thinking about the old iceberg and how most of it's below the surface. And if, like most brokers, you look above the surface on that little, the iceberg, so to speak, and you think, well, that's what everybody can see. That's the common component. So what can I talk about here? Well, rates, property prices, all of the standard boring stuff that every other mortgage broker talks about. Whereas if we go below the waterline and we start going, deeper and broader, and we see how big that iceberg really is, we can only really do that when we, look beneath the surface. Like, look beneath the surface. Who is my target market? What are they about? What resonates with them? What journey are they on? What outcomes do they want? And the deeper we go, the broader it becomes. Like, as we go under, like the iceberg goes deeper and broader. So we want to go deep so that we can have that broad, deep journey conversation with people, because that's what's going to really resonate with people. This just working at that top iceberg level, it's not going to really do anything. It's working beneath the surface that's going to really resonate with people. So if I'm thinking about, if I'm a mortgage broker and I'm out there and all of my engagement is about rates and property prices and just all the generic stuff and the price of avocados, nobody cares. Everyone's heard that 1,000 times. But if I pick a very specific niche and start talking to them, and I know what their journey is and where they're going and their ups and downs, I'll be able to talk directly to them. And this is one of the things I learned probably 15 years ago or 20 years ago, Ash, in the marketing world, in that if you can enter the conversation that's going on in other people's minds, your marketing will have an infinitely more powerful, it'll be infinitely more powerful, versus just having a surface level conversation about what you think. So that's kind of how to do it.
Look, I love that. And I think we should all take away from that the important nuggets. It's somebody said this to me the other day, and it resonated, that in business, but particularly a mortgage broking business, it's almost your number one area of focus is your marketing and engagement strategy, right? And I think what I see a lot is that brokers are putting the cart before the horse. They haven't worked out who it is they want to speak to, and they've engaged in a marketing strategy that's speaking to everybody, right? It's a lot of wood to burn for a little bit of fire. It does have some merits, but it's very hard to build an engagement strategy when you're not sure specifically who you're speaking to. So I think I would encourage everybody to find a way to start to take that what's in their head. I think if we asked our listeners, like, can you articulate to us right now who you love servicing? Who is your favorite client? What's their niche? What's special about them? What's the characteristics? What do you find most satisfying, fulfilling about working with that particular niche? I think most people could answer that. The challenge, I think, is how do I communicate, or how do I take that out of my brain and my experience and put it into a process of communicating out through social media? That's the challenge, right? And I think a lot of very creative people that are high level, great at solving problems with clients, are not necessarily skilled at taking what they know and feel in their sort of heart and mind with who they love working with. They don't necessarily have the skills to put that into copywriting and communications and videos. So I think that's where take the next step, find somebody who you can work with on this. It's something that we do, obviously, as part of our working with mortgage brokers, to start to find your voice and feed that into your overall business strategy. And then your marketing strategy will start to crystallize much more meaningfully, rather than just being, I've got a marketing strategy, but who are you speaking to? Or everybody. So I think there's so much upside, and I think it's part of the world we live in, James. If I could sort of even summarize it, there is people are looking for true connection isn't it funny, without being overly sort of philosophical or judgmental about it, we've never been more connected in the world, but I think people have never been more alone in the world. So I think that applies to your clients, that they don't just want more content, they want connection, and you've got to be speaking to them, not everybody.
That's perfect. That's perfect, Ash. I think just to push one step further on that as my sort of summary, it's like, I know this stuff is not the default easy for a lot of brokers. I'd rather just go and write more loans and talk to people. This is hard. I don't want to have to stuff around on writing articles and content and doing videos, and that's something I have to do. It's strange, listeners, brokers, you don't get to talk to people and help people unless you do marketing, and unless you get out there and network and talk to people. You don't get to do the stuff that you love unless you go and talk to people and help people. And thinking about sending newsletters and doing videos and engaging on social media, online and offline, we need to start to reframe this away from doing videos and marketing and ticking a box, and instead, this is my form of marketing and networking and getting out there to give me the opportunity to help people. I'm kind of sick of hearing people think and talk about this like it's a job and a chore and something I don't have time for, and I don't have money to spend on that. And it's like, hang on, if you don't do any of these things, just as if you don't talk to people and go out networking, you won't have anyone to help. So it's time all our brokers and listeners, everybody of this podcast, recognize that this whole area of engaging communities and sending content and writing articles and videos and social media, that's the new school networking. It's the knocking on doors in 2024. Like, before the internet, before computers, people knocked on doors, they went networking, they went to groups. And that took time and effort and money to do that. Well, it's the same thing now. We still knock on doors and we go to networking groups, but we also do that through our content and online and social profiles and engagement. So I think if every broker recognized that that's something to enjoy and spend time doing because it gets me the clients and the money I want, we'd have a very different approach across the industry to the sorts of things we talk about, like in these episodes, as opposed to just giving it the tick and flick. I think that's probably the biggest thing, if I could end on that.
Oh yeah, totally. And look, that's how we treat this podcast. Like we love doing this, right? We only speak to mortgage brokers, right? Because that's part of our lived experience as individuals, but also as the people that we love to help and work with, right? So use this as an example, right? We love what we do, and we don't need a script to follow, James. We sort of tried that in the first couple of episodes to keep us on track. And then we realized it's much better. We enjoy it much more. People seem to enjoy it much more when we just turn up with an idea and then we start talking about it, because it's inside of us already. We don't have to have a script to look at. We just speak from what's inside us, right? And occasionally we might go off on a tangent, occasionally.
Occasionally.
But I hope people value that we're speaking about what we love, and it comes from what we know and what we're passionate about. So if you can take that learning into what you do, you'll be off to a great start.
Exactly. And that's probably a great place to leave it. Listeners, there's obviously more to this. Listen to last week, listen to the next few episodes. And if you want a process and framework, and I guess to also be held accountable to installing these sorts of things in your business, then that's what we do. We've got the frameworks and the scripts. We can tell you, follow the bouncing ball. You don't have to do this by yourself. You just have to knock on our door and get some help. So let's talk, and we'll see if we can help you as well. Otherwise, have another fantastic week wherever you are in the country or the world, and hopefully you will too, Ash, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next week.
Go off and brave some Southern Victorian winter. I'll see you next week, James.
Done deal. See everybody. Bye for now.